My name is Brian Mitchell. I'm 40 years old. And until this summer, I honestly thought my wife and I had a pretty normal marriage. Stephanie and I had just sent our 2 sons to a summer training camp for 2 months, and I figured we'd use the quiet house to finally relax together, maybe take a trip, maybe just enjoy having time for ourselves again. Instead, my wife came up with an idea so insane, I nearly fell out of my chair and considered calling a divorce lawyer on the spot. She calmly told me she wanted to go on dates with other men, just for the experience, and to feel that excitement and romance again. When I stared at her and asked if she'd lost her mind, she smiled, corrected herself, and said she wasn't talking about just her. Apparently, according to Stephanie, both of us needed to start dating other people to improve our marriage. I honestly thought Stephanie had lost her mind. And I want to be clear. This wasn't a gradual realization. This wasn't me sitting with the idea for a few hours, weighing the pros and cons, and slowly coming to the conclusion that my wife had gone somewhere strange in her head. No, it was immediate. The moment those words left her mouth, something inside my brain just went tilt, like an old pinball machine that's been hit too hard. She was sitting right across from me at the kitchen table. "Stephanie," I said, "what are you actually talking about right now?" She folded her hands in front of her like she was about to present a very reasonable PowerPoint. I should have known then. My wife only folds her hands like that when she's rehearsed something. That's when she launched into her explanation. According to my wife, we had become, and I'm using her exact word here, too comfortable. We had kids, we had routines, we had responsibilities, and somewhere in between, soccer practices and mortgage refinancing and figuring out what to have for dinner every single night of our lives, we had apparently stopped being exciting. She said we'd become parents and roommates instead of a husband and wife. "We're like 2 people who share a house really efficiently," she said. "We're great at logistics, Brian. We are terrible at romance." Now, part of me wanted to argue with that. But the honest part of me, the part that remembers the last time I spontaneously did something romantic was probably 2019, that part kept its mouth shut. "Okay," I said carefully, the way you talk to someone standing too close to the edge of something. "So what's the solution?" And that's when she said it. Dating other people. Not cheating, she was very quick to point out. She put both hands up like I'd accused her of something. No kissing, no intimacy, nothing physical, nothing crossing any kind of line, just dinners, walks, conversations. Maybe some of those blind date events she'd seen advertised, the ones where you rotate around a room and talk to strangers for 5 minutes at a time like some kind of romantic game show. The whole point, she explained, was to feel that excitement again. To remember what it was like to be young and interesting and meet somebody new and not know how the evening was going to go. To have butterflies. To actually care about what you were wearing before you left the house. And then, she said, leaning forward, we bring that energy back. To us. To this. She gestured at the kitchen around her. At the fruit bowl and the sticky notes on the fridge and the calendar with dentist appointments on it. I looked at the calendar. I looked at her. I said, "You want to fix our marriage by going on dates with other men." "Dates," she repeated, with enormous emphasis on the word, like the distinction was doing a lot of heavy lifting. Not dates. I did not know what that meant. But here's where it got truly, spectacularly unhinged. Because just when I thought the whole proposal was crazy enough, she added a detail I was not remotely prepared for. She also made it very clear that this wasn't just about her. According to Stephanie, I should do it too. She actually, and I cannot stress this enough, she actually sounded excited about the idea of me going out with other women. Not suspicious, not worried, excited. Like she was giving me a gift I hadn't asked for and didn't want, but she was very proud of the wrapping. "It'll be good for you," she said. "When's the last time you talked to someone new? Really talked? Someone who doesn't already know every story you've ever told?" I opened my mouth. "Besides me," she added. I closed my mouth. She kept going. She used the word healthy at least 3 times. She said we'd come home from these dates appreciating each other more. She said there was research. She didn't cite any research, just gestured vaguely at the concept of research, suggesting that couples who maintain some level of individual identity and outside connection actually have stronger bonds. I still thought the entire idea sounded completely insane, and then she somehow made it even crazier. To prove she had nothing to hide, and I want you to understand that this was her way of making me feel better, she suggested that I could actually be nearby during her dates. Same restaurant, same coffee shop, different table obviously. She wasn't a monster, but I could be there. I could watch from a distance, like some kind of married undercover agent, if that made me feel better about the whole situation. I stared at her. "You want me to sit 10 feet away while you have dinner with another man," I said. "Only if you need to," she said. "For comfort." "That's not comfort, Stephanie. That's surveillance." "It's transparency," she said, and I swear she said it like it was a beautiful word. And then she smiled. That smile, the one that has gotten her out of every argument. And she said something that I'm going to hear echoing in my head for the rest of my natural life. "Think about it, Brian. I'd get a little adrenaline rush, like we're doing something naughty, but we're actually not doing anything wrong." I just sat there. My wife hadn't just invented some weird hobby. She had engineered an entire game, a whole elaborate system that lived somewhere outside my definition of a normal marriage, outside anything I'd ever seen modeled by any couple I'd ever known, outside every expectation I had brought into this relationship. She had built a thing, put a bow on it, and handed it to me like it was a timeshare presentation I should be grateful to attend. And the completely wild part, the part that I keep coming back to, is that she genuinely believed she was saving our marriage, not destroying it, saving it. She had the expression of someone who had found the solution to a problem nobody else had been smart enough to solve. I tried to think clearly, because here's the thing. Here's the part that kept me from just saying absolutely not, end of conversation. On one hand, yeah, this whole thing felt like a direct path toward divorce. What if she met someone she actually liked? What if one harmless dinner turned into something that wasn't harmless? What if this whole arrangement that was supposed to feel like a little romantic adventure slowly, quietly, completely blew up everything we'd built? Our house, our kids, our family. That was the fear on one side. But on the other side, and this is the thought I couldn't shake, the one I genuinely wish hadn't occurred to me. If I completely shut this down, what exactly was I stopping? If she wanted to do this and I said no, she'd either drop it and resent me for it, or she'd do it anyway, and just not tell me. And that thought scared me even more than the original idea. Because here's what I realized, sitting at my kitchen table on what had started as a completely normal evening. For the first time in 20 years of knowing this woman, I wasn't worried about other men. I was worried about my own wife. "Take your time," she said. And then she got up, filled her water glass, and went to watch TV, like she hadn't just rearranged the entire foundation of our marriage over the kitchen table on a Wednesday night. I sat there alone for a while. I spent about 3 days arguing with myself, not out loud mostly, just internally, the way you do when you're driving to work, or standing in the shower, or staring at the ceiling at 2 in the morning while your wife sleeps peacefully next to you because she, apparently, has no problem with any of this. I went back and forth probably 40 or 50 times. This is a terrible idea. But what's the alternative? I could just say no. And then what? And then nothing. And we go back to being comfortable and stale and... She said we were stale, Brian. She used that word about your marriage. Yeah. And offering me up to date other women was her solution. So maybe her judgment isn't perfect either. Fair point. But also, what if she's right? She's not right. What if she's a little bit right? This went on for 3 days. My logic, when I finally landed on something resembling a decision, was pretty simple. If our marriage was doomed, I'd rather find out sooner than later. Rip the bandage off. Better to know now, while the kids were at camp and the house was quiet, than to find out in 5 years in a much messier, much more expensive way. And maybe, just maybe, this completely unhinged experiment would actually work. Maybe we'd come out the other side closer and stronger, and we'd sit on a porch somewhere when we were old and laugh about the summer we did the most ridiculous thing imaginable to save our marriage. People do stranger things for love. I've seen the internet. So I walked into the kitchen on day 3, found Stephanie making coffee, and said, "Okay, fine, I'm in." She turned around with an expression that was trying very hard to be calm and supportive, but was actually completely delighted. "Yeah?" she said. "Don't make it weird," I said. She handed me a coffee and had the decency not to say I told you so, which, honestly, I appreciated. To keep things fair, because my wife is nothing if not committed to fairness in the things that do not matter, and completely immovable in the things that do, Stephanie suggested we draw lots to decide who would go first. She wrote our names on 2 pieces of paper, folded them up, and put them in the fruit bowl. I reached in. I pulled out a name. It said Stephanie. My wife pumped her fist. Actually pumped her fist. Like she'd won something. Like this was a prize. "Okay," she said, already moving toward her phone. "I'm going to sign up today." She'd already researched it, obviously. She'd found one of those blind date community things, an organized event where strangers get matched and agree to meet at a restaurant. No names exchanged beforehand, no photos. Nothing but a time and a place and the understanding that a stranger would be sitting across from you. The whole point was the mystery, the spontaneity, the total, complete absence of anything I would describe as a good idea. Somehow, that made the whole thing feel even crazier than it already was. Because at least if she'd been matched with someone on an app, I could have spent 3 hours stalking his profile and working myself into an anxious spiral in the comfort of my own home. But this was a complete unknown. This guy, whoever he was going to walk into a restaurant and sit down across from my wife, and I wasn't going to know a single thing about him until it happened. Great. Super. Very healthy for the marriage. The night of the date, Stephanie got dressed up. I want to be precise about this, because the details matter. It wasn't inappropriate. She wasn't dressed for a nightclub or a red carpet. But she was also very clearly not dressed for the grocery store or a parent-teacher conference. She was somewhere in the middle, the kind of dressed up that says I made an effort and I know I look nice. And I had not seen that particular version of my wife directed at an evening that didn't involve me in probably 4 years. I put on decent clothes myself. I didn't really know what the dress code was for covertly watching your wife's blind date from a nearby table. But I figured I shouldn't look like I just rolled in from mowing the lawn. I am a 40-year-old man who sat alone at a restaurant table, so I could watch my wife go on a date with another man. I keep having to remind myself I agreed to this. I got a table near the back, close enough to have a clear sightline, but far enough that it wasn't completely obvious what was happening. I ordered a club soda. I looked at the menu for a long time without reading it. I was very aware of every single thing happening in my peripheral vision. Stephanie was at a table maybe 30 feet away. She looked calm. She looked good. Neither of us knew who her date would be. That was the whole setup. Just, whoever shows up, shows up. About 20 minutes passed. I ordered a water. I rearranged my silverware. I considered texting my brother and then decided there was absolutely no version of that conversation I was ready to have. And then a guy walked in. I saw him before Stephanie did. He was maybe 37, 38. Average height, average build. The kind of face that you'd describe as fine. Not ugly, not movie star handsome. Just a regular guy in a nice shirt who had clearly also decided to make an effort tonight. He spoke to the host, got pointed in Stephanie's direction, and walked over. He introduced himself politely. She smiled. He sat down. And that was that. My wife was on a date. I sat there with my club soda like a man waiting for a job interview that was somehow also a dental procedure. They ordered drinks, then food. The conversation seemed to be moving along. He was talking, a lot actually. I noticed that from across the room, doing most of the heavy lifting, verbally speaking. Stephanie was nodding and smiling and doing the thing she does when she's being polite, which I recognized because I have been on the receiving end of polite Stephanie many times, and it has a very specific, carefully maintained quality to it. From where I was sitting, I couldn't hear a single word. Not one. The restaurant had enough ambient noise to make it completely impossible. So I just watched. And watching a conversation you can't hear is a very strange thing. You become very attuned to faces, micro-expressions, the tiny shifts in somebody's eyes. Stephanie laughed a few times. Genuinely, it seemed like, at first. But then I started noticing something else. Once or twice, maybe 3 times, there was this expression that crossed her face very briefly before she smoothed it back into a polite smile. A flicker of something that I, as a man who has known this woman for 2 decades, recognized immediately. It was the face she makes when someone says something so deeply stupid that she doesn't know how to respond without being rude. I've seen that face directed at the television during election coverage. I've seen it at Thanksgiving. I know that face the way I know the sound of our house settling at night. And then it got better. Whenever the guy looked away, checked his phone, glanced toward the window, flagged down the waiter, Stephanie would look over at me, just for a second, and she started making faces. Not subtle faces, not discreet, carefully coded, could be interpreted multiple ways faces. Full faces, theatrical faces, the kind of faces you'd make if you were trying to communicate something urgent to a person sitting in the back row of a large theater. At one point, she widened her eyes so dramatically, I was genuinely concerned about her vision. Another time, she subtly, and I use that word loosely, pointed at the guy with one finger while simultaneously making an expression that I can only describe as someone who has just opened a container in the fridge that's been there too long. I kept trying to gesture back. What? What happened? What did he say? I was doing the eyebrow thing. I was doing the small hand movements that were supposed to look like nothing to anyone else, but clearly meant something. At one point, I mouthed the words, "Are you okay?" And she responded with a face that I can only describe as technically yes, but also absolutely not. Looking back, I am pretty confident that at least 4 other tables in that restaurant noticed us. There was a couple 2 tables over who spent a suspicious amount of time looking between me and Stephanie and me again, and I'd like to believe they thought we were strangers who happened to be making eye contact. But I know we were absolutely not pulling that off. The guy got up and headed toward the restroom. The moment he was out of sightline, Stephanie's entire body language changed. She dropped the polite smile completely. She put her elbows on the table and covered her face with both hands for approximately 3 seconds. Then she picked up her phone. My phone buzzed. Stephanie message, "This is horrible. Absolute disaster. Let's leave. Meet me in the parking lot." I stared at the text for a second. Then I put my napkin on the table, left some cash, and walked out like a man who had been sitting there completely alone for entirely normal reasons. We had agreed beforehand that if things got unbearable, she was allowed to politely end the evening. Judging by his expression as I watched through the window from the parking lot, the guy absolutely wanted to continue the date and was not entirely thrilled about how it was ending. But Stephanie, when she has decided something is over, is a force of nature. She has ended arguments, road trips, birthday parties, and apparently blind dates with the same quiet, immovable certainty. 10 minutes later, she opened the passenger side door of my car and dropped into the seat. She let out a sigh that seemed to come from somewhere deep in her soul, the kind of sigh that contains a whole evening's worth of restrained reaction. "Oh my God, Brian," she said. "That was awful." I laughed. I couldn't help it. "Bad? Bad?" She turned to look at me with an expression of genuine disbelief, like I had profoundly underestimated the situation. This man is unbelievable. I have never, in my life, heard that much nonsense come out of one human being. Not television, not social media, Not the comment section of anything has ever produced this volume of conspiracy theory garbage in one sitting. I honestly think he might be clinically unwell. I'm not diagnosing him. I'm just saying, Brian, he had theories about everything. The government, the water supply, certain famous musicians who he believes are not actually human. Okay, I said. So, not a great first outing. Not a great... She stopped, looked at me. I need you to take this seriously. I am taking it seriously. You have a face. I don't have a face. You have a very specific face that you make when you think something is funny, but you're trying not to show it. And you've had it since I got in the car. She wasn't wrong. I opened my mouth to say something reasonable, and then someone knocked on passenger side window. Both of us nearly left our bodies. Stephanie grabbed my arm. I think I made a sound that I will not be describing in detail. My heart relocated briefly to my throat. I turned toward the window, half expecting, I don't know what I was expecting. The date? A parking attendant? Someone who had watched our entire silent sign language performance from across the restaurant and had come to ask what was wrong with us? Stephanie and I turned toward the window at exactly the same speed, like two people in a horror movie who already know they don't want to see what's behind the door. It was the same guy, John, her date, standing in the parking lot next to my car, looking slightly sheepish. My first thought was, is this a threat situation? My second thought was, why is this my life? Stephanie lowered the window about 3 inches. The universal signal for I'll hear you out, but I'm not fully committing. John shifted his weight and glanced between the two of us. Stephanie, I wanted to ask for your number, but I forgot earlier. Good thing I found you out here. A pause. Oh, who's this? And I genuinely felt bad for the guy. From his perspective, he just had a first date and walked out to find the woman sitting in some other man's car in the parking lot. He had no idea he'd accidentally wandered into whatever this was. I started to open my mouth. Some version of, I'm her husband. It's complicated, long story. But Stephanie got there first. I'm sorry, John, she said, completely calm, but I can't give you my number because I'm actually an alien from the Pleiades star cluster. I stopped breathing. My companion here, she continued, gesturing at me, is the commander of our research team. I stared straight ahead through the windshield like a man trying to remember how to operate his own face. She kept going. The date, she explained, had been a test, organized by extraterrestrials, to assess his readiness for contact. And the good news, the really excellent news, was that John had passed. He was now considered worthy of future communication with humanity's cosmic neighbors. I was holding the steering wheel with both hands and staring at a stop sign across the parking lot and using every resource available to me as a human adult not to completely lose it. Then I heard it. I knew it! I looked at John. The man's face had transformed entirely. He looked like a kid on Christmas morning. He was, and I am not embellishing this, bouncing. Actually bouncing slightly, on both feet, in a parking lot, at 9:30 at night. I knew this was coming. I've been saying this. Stephanie turned to look at me. The expression on her face was the most purely horrified thing I have ever seen on another human being. Drive, she whispered. I drove. Once we were 2 blocks away and she was confident John was not pursuing us through traffic, Stephanie explained that he had spent the entire date, both the drinks and the food, talking about UFOs, shadow governments, alien contact protocols, and the specific star systems from which various extraterrestrial civilizations had originated. I panicked, she said. It was the first thing I could think of. You told him you were from the Pleiades. He brought up the Pleiades 4 times during dinner, Brian. I was working with the material I had. I couldn't argue with the logic. So, date number 1, complete disaster, accidental alien confirmation, narrow parking lot escape. We were off to a great start. A few days later, it was my turn. Same system, blind date, different restaurant. This one was some kind of themed cafe. The kind of place with mismatched furniture and chalkboard menus and exposed brick and a general atmosphere of, we're quirky and we'd like you to know it. My date was already there when I arrived. Her name was Amanda. She was around 33, and she had, I want to be respectful here and also completely accurate, committed fully to a look. Everything was black. The dress, the accessories, the lipstick, the eye makeup, which was dark and dramatic enough to be visible from a meaningful distance. Her skin was very pale, and the contrast with everything else created an effect that was, genuinely, striking. Gothic rock concert, fully realized, sitting in a cafe next to a display of artisan jam. Not my usual type. I'll say that plainly. And, again, respectfully, because there is nothing wrong with any of this, and people are all different. Amanda was a larger woman, not someone I'd typically picture myself with, physically speaking. I processed all of this in about 4 seconds, sat down, said hello, and reminded myself that first impressions are frequently wrong. 2 tables away, I could see Stephanie. She had a drink in front of her and was absolutely radiating delight. Every time I glanced over, she was wearing this enormous grin, the kind a person wears when they feel the universe has personally rewarded them. She looked like someone watching their favorite part of a movie they've already seen. I looked away from my wife and focused on my date. And here's the thing. Amanda was genuinely interesting. She loved animals with what I can only describe as serious dedication. She had enough pets to represent multiple species simultaneously. She worked in some creative field that I followed for about 60% of the explanation before losing the thread, had a lot of hobbies, and was clearly smart and well-read. The reading is where things got educational. Amanda loved books, referenced them constantly, brought them up naturally in conversation the way some people bring up movies or sports. The issue was, the books she loved were, how do I put this, very specifically intended for adults. Not in a vague way. In a detailed, enthusiastic, she has opinions about the genre way. She mentioned one title in the first 10 minutes. I nodded like I knew what it was. I did not know what it was, but I recognized from context what category of literature it belonged to. Then she mentioned another one. Then she started comparing them, structurally, thematically. She had thoughts about narrative voice and character development, and I was sitting there at a cafe table at 7 in the evening, receiving an academic analysis of a genre of fiction that I had not anticipated being discussed on this particular evening, or frankly any evening. I glanced at Stephanie. Stephanie had both hands over her mouth. Her shoulders were shaking. I looked back at Amanda, who was mid-sentence about something involving a protagonist and a secondary character, and a situation that I will not be describing here, and I nodded and said, that's an interesting structural choice, because apparently that's who I am now. Amanda lit up. Right? Most people don't even think about the structure. Most people, I agreed. Across the restaurant, my wife was crying, silently, from laughter, into her napkin. I was going to need a full debrief when this was over, and possibly a drink. Every few minutes, Amanda would casually drop another title, and based on her descriptions, roughly 80% of the plot of each one involved people making decisions that would get them banned from a Thanksgiving dinner. Apparently, entire communities existed around these books. Facebook groups, annual conventions, dedicated podcasts. A whole ecosystem of enthusiastic readers, and Amanda was clearly an active participant in all of it. The strange part was the tone. She talked about these books exactly the way guys at my office talk about fantasy football, with genuine passion. I just kept nodding. Interesting, yeah, And honestly, despite everything, she was fun to talk to. Genuinely smart. Then I noticed the staring. Amanda wasn't just maintaining eye contact, she was locked in. The kind of eye contact that makes you suddenly aware of your own face. Then she laughed at something I said and touched my arm. Light, quick. I filed it under friendly, then she complimented my voice, then my shoulders, then my beard. Then she tilted her head slightly and said, "I looked comforting." And that's when the alarm went off. Not a subtle alarm. A full, loud, "this situation has changed" alarm. Because it was suddenly very obvious that Amanda was not here for a nice conversation. Amanda was interested. Genuinely, actively, increasingly, less subtly interested. I glanced at Stephanie. Stephanie was approximately 4 seconds from sliding out of her chair. She had one hand on the table for physical support and was staring at me with the expression of someone watching the greatest entertainment of their life unfold in real time. She mouthed something at me. I'm pretty sure it was, "Oh no." I looked back at Amanda and smiled and said something completely neutral and started mentally calculating how long before I could reasonably leave. Eventually, I told Amanda I should head home. Politely, cleanly. She looked disappointed in the way people look when they'd had a specific idea about how an evening was going to go. Then she invited me back to her place. I declined immediately. Clear, no hesitation, no room for interpretation. Amanda didn't seem offended. She paused, sighed with real theatrical weight, and explained that she'd walked to the cafe and wasn't comfortable walking home alone this late. "It's only 10 minutes, she said. I looked at her. I looked towards Stephanie's table, where my wife was conveniently studying her menu with great concentration. Here's the thing. What if she actually was nervous? 10 minutes. Sidewalk. Public street. I could do 10 minutes. I excused myself to the restroom and texted Stephanie. Her response, 10 laughing emojis, then, "Brian, Amanda is going to eat you alive." After a brief negotiation, we settled on a plan. I'd walk Amanda home. Stephanie would follow in the car and pick me up after. This is what marriage looks like now. I want everyone to know that. The first few minutes of the walk were fine. Amanda talked about her pets, complained about her boss, recommended 3 more books I will never read. Normal enough. Then she drifted closer. Just slightly. Then a little more. The compliments resumed. She said it was refreshing to meet a real gentleman. She mentioned how quiet her house got at night, and how nice it would be to continue the conversation somewhere more comfortable. I pretended not to understand. She got less subtle. I pretended harder. I have never worked so hard at appearing oblivious in my life. I was giving an Oscar-level performance of a man who simply does not pick up on signals. By the time we reached her front door, I had my exit speech ready. Polite, warm, final. "Well, Amanda, it was really nice meeting you." She grabbed both my hands, stepped forward, significantly forward, closer than the conversation required. My brain just stopped. For 1 full second, complete blank. No thoughts, no words, nothing. And then, tires, a horn. Both of us jumped back. Stephanie's car came around the corner and pulled into the driveway with an energy that suggested she'd been waiting for exactly this moment. My wife leaned halfway out the window and, at a volume the entire neighborhood could hear, shouted, "This is a robbery! I'm stealing a guy!" I didn't think. I didn't speak. I moved toward the car with the speed of a man who has been given an exit and intends to use it fully. I got in. Door shut. Stephanie floored it. In the side mirror, I could see Amanda standing at the end of her driveway, completely motionless, watching us go. The expression on her face was exactly what you'd expect from someone who had just watched a man get extracted from her front yard by a woman screaming about robbery. Neither of us said anything for about 30 seconds. Then I exhaled. Stephanie, that was horrifying. She nearly drove into a mailbox. "Oh, come on," she managed, between actual tears. "Amanda adored you. That woman was going to adopt me." Stephanie laughed so hard she had to slow down. And somewhere in the middle of it, her losing her mind in the driver's seat, me sitting there still slightly in shock, I started laughing too. Couldn't help it. Because what else do you do? It was Thursday night. My wife had just staged a fake robbery to rescue me from a gothic book enthusiast's front porch. 20 years of marriage, and I genuinely could not have predicted this specific evening. That had to count for something. By the time we got home, we both looked like people who had lived several additional years in the span of 1 week. Stephanie poured herself a drink. I poured myself one too. We dropped onto the couch and sat in complete silence, staring at nothing in particular, like two soldiers who had just returned from a campaign neither of us had fully understood going in. About 30 seconds passed. Then we both opened our mouths at exactly the same moment. Never again. We looked at each other. Then we both started laughing. The kind of laughing that's mostly exhaustion wearing a funny costume. The kind that takes a minute to fully stop. When it settled, Stephanie shook her head slowly. "Brian, I love you, but I am done. No more experiments. No more blind dates. No more men who think I was sent by the Pleiades to evaluate their readiness for galactic citizenship. And no more women who treat literary criticism as a first date activity," I said. She almost lost her drink. We sat there a little longer, and then Stephanie got quiet in the way she does when something real is coming. "I love you," she said. "I just wanted us to feel happy again. That's all this was." I squeezed her hand. "I love you too. But next time, let's try literally anything else first. Cooking class, dance lessons, literally anything." Agreed. Couples therapy would have been cheaper. Significantly cheaper. We sat there smiling at nothing for a moment. The house was quiet. No kids, no chaos, no strangers with theories about the water supply. Then something occurred to me. I picked up my phone, spent about 3 minutes on a booking site, and slid it across to her without saying anything. Beachfront hotel. 1 week. Available in 4 days. Honeymoon version 2. She stared at the screen, then she looked up, and she smiled. The real one, the one that hasn't changed since the first time I saw it. And I remembered with complete clarity why I'd married this woman. 4 days later, we packed bags and drove to the coast. No strangers, no blind dates, no matching algorithms, just us. And honestly, it was exactly what we needed. Long walks on the beach, good food, sleeping in, sitting on a hotel balcony in the evening with a drink, watching the water, not having anywhere to be. We laughed about the whole thing constantly. You can't go through something that strange and not talk about it. We'd reconstruct scenes, Stephanie doing her alien announcement, me doing my best impression of John bouncing in the parking lot, both of us reliving the moment Stephanie's car came screaming into Amanda's driveway like a getaway driver who'd been waiting for her cue. And somewhere in between all the laughing, something had shifted. Not dramatically, not like a movie, just quietly. We were talking again, not about the kids' schedules or what needed to be fixed in the house, just talking, the way we used to, about everything and nothing, staying up too late because neither of us wanted the conversation to end. Turns out, we didn't need new people. We just needed time for each other. Which, when I say it out loud, sounds like something that should have been obvious without the field research. But here we are. We still call it the Great Dating Experiment. It comes up more often than you'd think. At dinner, out of nowhere, on long drives. Stephanie will get a certain look, and I already know what's coming. She'll tilt her head and ask, very seriously, "So, commander of the alien research team, how are our relations with Earth progressing?" And every single time, without fail, I laugh. Which maybe, after everything, is the whole point. 20 years in, and my wife can still make me laugh in the living room on a Tuesday night. She can still come up with something so completely unhinged that I spend 3 days reconsidering my entire life. And then somehow it becomes the best week we've had in years. That's not stale. That's just us. And honestly, I'll take it. If you felt this story hit hard, drop a like, subscribe for more, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your support keeps Steelheart beating.